Hello there, and welcome to Echoes of the Imperium. I'm truly glad you've arrived. Maybe it's been a long day, or maybe you're the kind of soul who prefers to drift into sleep with thoughts of distant stars and ancient cosmic secrets instead of counting sheep. Either way, tonight's journey belongs to you. You don't need to do anything now, just rest. Let your mind grow quiet, your breath steady, and your body feel lighter. As if even the pull of gravity has begun to fade away. I felt the first shiver of the multiverse long before the Imperium had a name for it, long before Terra received my message, long before the High Lords sharpened their paranoia into a weapon, and the memory of that subtle, impossible vibration still lingers in my bones, a ghostly echo of the moment the universe itself flinched under the weight of something far older, far colder, and far more patient than anything birthed by our warp-scarred reality. And as I stood in the forgotten sublevels beneath the Noctis labyrinth, surrounded by rust-flaked sigils and abandoned vaults that whispered with ancient Mechanicus machine spirits too weak to speak, I realized with a dread I could not voice that this tremor was not a warning. It was a knock. They say the Imperium has stood for 10,000 years, that it has endured the rise and fall of empires, the madness of the warp, and the eternal screams of demons tearing at the veil. But all that endurance bred arrogance. And that arrogance blinded us to the idea that something outside our reality might simply notice us, and in noticing, reach out as one might brush dust from a sleeve. I, Inquisitor Malachi Thorn of the Ordo Chronos, had been dispatched to investigate what the Adeptus Mechanicus called a temporal discontinuity, though even they spoke the words with unease, as if ashamed to admit their logic engines could not define it. And when I descended with a cohort of silent sisters and a detachment of Lucian Scutari into the cold, luminescent chamber where the anomaly pulsed, I understood at once that this was no warp tear, no demonic event, no psychic wound. The warp is alive, chaotic, violent, hungry, and anything born from it reeks of corruption and screaming intent. But this anomaly was silent, perfectly silent, not psychic silent, not null. Or rather, it was null in a way even the sisters could not comprehend. A silence so absolute that their null auras flickered, as though confused by the presence of something that did not exist within the Emperor's great design, nor the warp's ravenous chaos. The chamber was cold enough to sting exposed skin, yet no visible frost formed. The air vibrated with soft harmonic frequencies that made the Vox units hum without transmitting sound. The rift hovered at the center of the chamber like a shard of impossibility, crystalline edges forming a perfect geometric aperture suspended in absolute defiance of gravity or physics, a flawless crack in the fabric of our cosmos. The Magos attempted analysis, unleashing waves of holoscan arrays, dimensional mapping protocols, and forbidden xenometric tools salvaged from the ruins of Jericho. But each reading collapsed into paradox. Each data string folded in on itself like a dying star, and each equation returned the same impossible answer. This is not of our universe. Yet when the first servo probe entered the aperture, it did not scream. It did not burn. It did not dissolve. Its signal simply ended, cut off in a clean, instantaneous severing that left no trace, no debris, not even residual data in its machine spirit memory. It was as if the multiverse had reached through the rift, plucked the probe from our reality, and discarded it. We tried a second probe, then a third, then one amplified with a psychic dampener. All vanished. No energy spikes, no temporal backlash, no warp resonance, nothing. And in that nothingness lay the greatest horror of all, for the warp touches everything, even the dead, even the soulless, even the forgotten. Yet whatever existed beyond that shimmering cold aperture did not touch the warp at all. It was a place without chaos, without souls, without echoes. A world, or perhaps worlds, where the warp had never existed. A sterile infinity. On the third day of study, after sleepless nights measuring temporal drifts too faint for human perception, and listening to the sisters' uneasy silence as their null fields twitched like frightened animals, the moment came that changed everything. One of the sisters, a novice barely out of training, whispered a prayer. Not a dramatic invocation, not a psychic flare, just a soft, trembling, very human plea to the Emperor for courage. And the rift reacted. Faster than thought, it tightened into a narrow slit, then expanded outward in a pulse like a heartbeat. Every lumen flickered, every machine spirit wailed. The Magos collapsed as his logic core overload shut down half his augmetics. The sisters staggered as their null auras surged violently, overwhelmed by the absolute absence emanating from the anomaly. And then it happened. Something looked back. Not a shape, not a creature, not an intelligence with eyes, but an attention. A colossal, distant, indifferent awareness that swept across us like the shadow of an ancient behemoth passing over a lone traveler. It examined us. It understood us. It dismissed us. And in that cold moment of observation, I felt something break inside me. We were not alone in creation. We were a footnote. When the presence withdrew and the rift fell still, the silence in the chamber was suffocating. I could feel the sisters trembling. Even the Skitarii held their breath, as if expecting the universe to shatter. And I realized the Imperium would never believe this unless someone spoke with authority. Someone with rank, someone with fearlessness, or perhaps someone with enough desperation to act. So I sent the message, 5 words. Words that would ignite a conflict no mind in the galaxy could comprehend. Contact verified. Prepare for escalation. I believed then that I was warning them. I see now that I was challenging them. And the Imperium, unyielding, paranoid, and proud, answered the only way it knows how. It declared war on the multiverse. The High Lords claimed they acted with measured consideration. But when my report reached Terra, when they read that something beyond our universe had looked upon us with cold indifference, when they understood it was not warp-born, not demonic, not catalogued by any order of the Inquisition, their deliberations lasted barely 7 hours before erupting into the kind of fear that masquerades as piety. And their response, delivered with the full weight of imperial decree, was as predictable as it was catastrophic. The Imperium shall not be observed by alien realms without consequence. Mobilize all necessary forces for preemptive sanction. Preemptive sanction. I remember reading those words in the command sanctum aboard my flagship, the Resolute Vow, as we translated out of the Noctis Labyrinth and into orbit above a dust-wreathed dead world. Preemptive sanction was High Lord rhetoric for holy war. War against something not yet understood. Something whose weapons, motives, or nature remained utterly unknowable. The Imperium had declared war not against a species, not against a planet, not against a heretical sect or invading empire, but against the concept of an outside reality itself. That decision echoed across the galaxy with the cold, ringing clarity of a blade unsheathed. Astropaths screamed from the psychic backlash of the decree. Navigator houses whispered omens of fracture lines running through the warp like hairline cracks in a dying lens. Even the Adeptus Custodes grew uneasy, though they would never admit unease even at the mouth of the Eye of Terror. As for me, I felt something else, guilt, thick, suffocating guilt. I had wanted truth. I had sought understanding. But what I gave the High Lords was fear wrapped in knowledge, terror disguised as revelation. And fear is the one thing the Imperium knows how to weaponize perfectly. So they summoned a crusade. Not a grand one, not a spectacle like the Black Templar Zeal Marches or the Indomitus Crusade, but a silent one, an unrecorded, unofficial, sealed by oath shadow crusade meant to probe the multiverse breach, to extract whatever could be learned. To test the boundaries of those cold, warp-silent realms, they sent Custodians, Sisters, Psychic Nulls, Mechanicus Archmagi, and 3 full companies of the Iron Hands, whose flesh-hating stoicism made them ideal for a mission in which human frailty would be an immediate liability. And they made me lead it. I was the witness, the one who first felt the tremor in reality, the one whose words had pushed the Imperium toward its most audacious and reckless war in 10,000 years. As we assembled around the anomaly, now encased in a colossal Mechanicus containment spire, I felt the weight of that responsibility settle upon me like a gravestorm. The containment field pulsed, shimmering with cold energies as the rift thinned, widened, and pulsed in rhythm with something external, something observing us with increasing curiosity. The air around it trembled. Nulls collapsed into seizures. The Custodians tightened their grips on their guardian spears, their statuesque poise cracking just enough for me to see the truth. Even they felt dread. When the order came to send the first living entities through, the Sisters of Silence volunteered, not because they lacked fear, but because fear meant nothing to them. Their psychic emptiness was both shield and curse, and as they stepped into the shimmering aperture, their forms grew distorted, stretched into silhouettes that bent into angles no mortal geometry should permit. Their vox feeds went dead. Their vitals went silent. For 13 seconds we heard nothing, saw nothing, felt nothing through the tethered auspex. Then static, like someone dragging bone across glass. Their forms reappeared in the containment screens as they stepped back into our reality, unharmed, uninjured, untouched. But their expressions, those emotionless, null-cold visages, were different. Hollow in a way I had never seen. They reported what they witnessed with flat, emotionless precision. Absence. A realm without warp, without echoes. No daemons, no souls, no psychic presence. No time as we perceive it. A universe with no warp. A multiverse not ruled by the screaming tides of chaos. A place fundamentally alien to ours. Not by life, not by species, but by the very laws that defined existence. And the moment the sisters confirmed that, everything changed. The Mechanicus immediately assessed it as exploitable. The High Lords labeled it a potential sanctuary or weapon. The Iron Hands declared it an opportunity for purging weakness from humanity by embracing pure reality. Even the Custodians saw value in it. If the Imperium could anchor a foothold in a warp-silent universe, it would possess a strategic position from which even the ruinous powers could not reach. But I, standing in the flickering half-light of the containment chamber, I felt something else entirely: terror. Not because this place lacked the warp, but because something in that place had watched us the first time. And if the Imperium marched into that realm, then whatever lived there would see that as war. Yet nothing I said mattered. The Imperium does not step back once a war is declared. It does not negotiate with the unknown. So they built the first multiversal gate, a vast machine temple of black steel and humming pylons, a fusion of forbidden xenotech, lost Dark Age schematics, and raw Mechanicus ingenuity. Its engines carved a stable throat between realities. Its pylons bent the impossible into obedience. Its lumen strips pulsed like the heartbeat of a trapped god. And when it stabilized, the order came from Terra with terrifying simplicity. Advance. The first wave consisted of the Iron Hands, cold, methodical, fearless in their rejection of flesh. Their captain saluted me before stepping into the radiant vortex, his voice cold through metallic vox. Fear is flesh, Inquisitor. We have no use for it. They vanished into the multiverse. Their vitals spiked once, then leveled. Their telemetry streamed data so alien the Mechanicus could barely translate it. They advanced further, then deeper still, and at the 49th minute, something found them. Their signals fractured, their auspex warped, their biometrics spiked into unreadable static. And the last thing heard through the vox, before everything went silent, was a single Iron Hand's voice, distorted into a metallic scream of impossible fear. It saw us. The Imperium had made its first move, and the multiverse had answered. I have replayed the Iron Hand's final transmission countless times, though each attempt leaves me hollowed a little more than before, because there was something deeply wrong in that last distorted cry. Something no Astartes, least of all the Iron Hands, should ever be capable of. Fear, raw and unfiltered. The kind of fear that strips a warrior down to the child he once was. A fear that not even the cold, flesh-hating doctrines of their chapter could erase. And when the vox feed dissolved into static so cold, it felt like frost forming in my veins. I realized with a sinking horror that the multiverse had not only seen them, it had recognized them as intruders. For hours after the silence, the machine spirits of the gate shrieked in static tongues. The lumen strips flickered like dying embers, and the psychic nulls convulsed as if something was scraping against the inside of their skulls from a place where sound did not exist. The Custodians stood motionless, their golden armor dimmed to the shade of tarnished idols. But even they exchanged glances, small, controlled movements, the kind that only an Inquisitor trained to read death before it arrives might notice. I wanted to halt the operation, to invoke my authority and order a full withdrawal. But the Magos overseeing the gate, his metal skull twitching with glitched binaric chants, insisted that telemetry indicated the Iron Hands were alive. Displaced, but intact. Though I saw the truth, he did not care if they were alive, only that they had gone further than anything in Imperial history had ever dared. And so, with the weight of that lie spreading like rot, I authorized the second wave. This was the moment the Imperium crossed a threshold it could never retreat from. For the second wave was not Astartes, it was Imperial Guard, a regiment of Krieg, chosen for their obedience, their resilience, their willingness to march into oblivion for the Emperor without hesitation. Watching them line up before the gate was like watching ghosts preparing to walk into their graves. Their rebreathers hissed in the frigid air, their trench coats fluttered in the artificial wind of the containment chamber, and though they felt no fear, not in the way ordinary men do, I felt fear for them. When they stepped into the shimmering throat of reality, their bodies elongated into silver silhouettes, flickering like candle flames in a vacuum. Their vitals streamed onto hollow displays as rows of stable, unwavering lines. But then those lines began to warp. Not spike, not break. Warp, as though something on the other side was rewriting the meaning of alive, modifying the parameters of existence itself. Their coordinates stretched into numbers that made the Magos mutter fragmented curses. Their timestamps began running backward in slow oscillations. And then we saw it, through the grainy, flickering lens of an Auspex feed buckling under pressure from laws of physics that disagreed with its fundamental purpose. Shapes, not creatures, shapes. Towering geometric forms moving with the fluidity of thought, their edges bending inward, outward, and through themselves in ways that hurt to look at. They did not walk. They unfolded. They did not observe. They encompassed. One of them drifted near the Krieg formation, its perfectly smooth surface rippling like liquid metal reacting to proximity. As it passed through a trooper, his vitals went flat for a moment, then returned, but wrong. His heartbeat did not sound like a heartbeat. His brain waves resembled mechanical patterns seen in corrupted servitors, and when his vox opened, his voice was not his own. It was calm, cold, analytical. "It is mapping us," he said, not as a scream, not in fear, as a statement delivered with eerie tranquility. Then his helmet imploded inward without force or pressure, simply folded in on itself as if reality decided his head no longer needed to exist. That was the moment I froze, the moment I understood. The warp-silent realm was not empty. It was structured, ruled, contained by a consciousness that did not define life as we do, did not define matter as we do, did not define identity as we do. And we were insects crawling across its floor. The Custodians wanted to intervene. The Magos wanted to continue. The Krieg did not want anything. They simply followed orders until death, and death had already begun swallowing them, one by one, with methodical precision. I ordered immediate extraction. The Magos refused. The gate surged, its pylons glowing a sickly violet as the machine began to react not to our commands but to the presence beyond. The multiverse was pulling, not aggressively, not with hunger or malice, but with curiosity. It wanted to examine us further. I fired my bolt pistol into the Magos' cranial unit, severing his connection to the gate, his body collapsing in a shower of sparks and leaking coolant. The Custodians finished the override. The gate sputtered, screamed, and collapsed inward like a dying star folding under its own weight, severing the connection inches before the geometric shapes could reach across the threshold. The chamber fell silent in an instant, so profound it felt like the universe exhaled. But the damage was done. The data the Krieg transmitted before their annihilation was enough for the Mechanicus archivists to decipher a chilling truth. The multiverse realm was not a universe. It was a system, a structured, ordered lattice, maintained and surveilled by entities that operated above our concept of life. They were not gods. They were not demons. They were not Xenos. They were architects. And when the Iron Hands had entered, they had triggered something akin to a security protocol. Something had looked, cataloged, and responded. And now, across thousands of sectors, astropaths reported flickers, cold pulses, echoes of something scanning our universe from beyond its walls. The multiverse was not attacking us. It was studying us. And the Imperium, proud, paranoid, unyielding, was already preparing its retaliation. Even as I stood in that dark chamber, surrounded by the smell of blood, ozone, and burnt circuitry, I realized the truth. The Imperium had declared war on the multiverse. But the multiverse had not yet declared war on us. It had only just noticed us. And soon it would answer. In the drifting silence between dimensions, I felt the Emperor's command pulse through the psychic marrow of my being. A low and resonant summons that vibrated through armor plating and bone alike. And as the multiverse cracked open in front of us like a wounded star bleeding infinite realities, I realized that the war we had begun was no longer a war of conquest, but a war of definition, a struggle to determine whose truth would remain when all others were burned away. The Imperial Victory Engine, our cathedral-sized reality grafter, hovered above the latticework of universes, its golden underside reflecting fragmented copies of myself, each one distorted by timelines that should not exist. And as I stared across the shimmering wound we had carved into the multiverse, I saw 1,000 versions of Holy Terra flicker in and out of existence like dying candles, some glorious, some desolate, some ruled by unfamiliar tyrants bearing crowns made of broken suns. The custodes around me stood motionless, statues carved from dusk and devotion, but I could feel their minds quiver through the psychic field, overwhelmed by the tidal pull of infinite imperial histories collapsing into one another. And in that moment, the sheer size of what we had provoked made the air feel thinner, like something essential was being siphoned from our lungs. Even the choir could no longer maintain the hymnal stability of the passageway. Reality buckled under the weight of overlapping timelines, twisting into spirals of mirrored star systems that reflected each other like a hall of cosmic obsidian. A version of the Emperor stepped through the rift, taller, sharper, draped in a mantle of living constellations, and when his eyes met mine, I felt my soul recoil with an instinctive terror no training could suppress. His voice did not echo but layered itself, dozens of tones from dozens of universes speaking at once, each one contradicting and affirming the other in a harmony built of paradox. And he asked us, not demanded but asked, why we had chosen to ignite a war that could unmake everything. My own Emperor answered through me, a surge of golden authority so bright my vision failed, because existence must be corrected. The two emperors, the one I served and the one that had stepped through, stood with only the torn membrane of reality between them. And for a heartbeat, the multiverse held its breath as divine wills collided like colliding dimensions grinding to dust. The shockwave rippled outwards, tearing chunks of space from the void, ripping time into ribbons so thin they fluttered like torn banners. Around us, alternate imperia began to converge, legions of ultramarines forged from timelines we had never known, Black Templar crusades from futures that should have been impossible, sisters of battle clad in living flame drawn from faiths alien to our own, each force reacting with confusion, devotion, or horror as they beheld an imperium not their own claiming dominion over all creation. On our flank, a broken world drifted past, carried by gravitational currents that should not exist, its surface crawling with starved, feral forms of Astartes degraded by centuries of temporal decay, their armor fused with bone, their eyes hollow and glowing like dying nebulae. And when they bowed to our Emperor, I felt something inside me fracture, because even in their ruined state, they still recognized the shape of divine authority. My mind trembled with the psychic feedback of 1,000 emperors arguing across the space between universes, each one a son of impossible power casting contradictory shadows. And I finally understood the scale of the catastrophe. The multiverse was never meant to contain more than one throne. 2 was already a heresy against physics. 1,000 was a wound too deep to close. The throne worlds began resonating like instruments tuned to slightly different notes, their frequencies colliding, amplifying, building toward a catastrophic crescendo. If not resolved, the multiverse would collapse into a singularity of broken faith and clashing timelines. I wanted to scream the truth into the void, but the words died in my throat. This war was not merely the Imperium asserting control. It was the Imperium attempting to choose which version of the Emperor was the true one. And as the cosmic duel between divine egos intensified, I realized with a cold, sinking dread that whichever Emperor prevailed would not merely conquer the multiverse. He would become the multiverse, a singular truth overwritten across infinite realities like scripture burned into the skin of creation itself. And in the reflection of the Victory Engine's golden hull, I saw myself again, thousands of versions of me, each preparing to die in a war none of us fully understood. Our fates merging into one long thread, stretching toward a battlefield where even gods could be unmade. And for the first time since taking the oath on Terra's marble floors, I feared that the Imperium had drawn its blade too far, struck too deep, reached for something even the Emperor was never meant to grasp. A war of thrones had begun, and only one universe would survive to tell the tale. I felt the end long before I saw it, a slow rising tremor beneath the armor, like the heartbeat of a dying star trying to pound its way back to life. And as the Victory Engine drifted deeper into the multiversal breach, its cathedrals of metal groaning under the pressure of overlapping infinities, I sensed the Emperor's presence fading, not dimming, but stretching. being pulled thin across realities as though the multiverse itself wished to divide him into pieces. The choir screamed without sound, their minds unraveling in golden threads that drifted like dust motes across the shattered void. And when I reached out to steady one of them, my gauntlet passed through his shoulder as though he were made of smoke. He dissolved into a shimmer of displaced timelines that fluttered away into the abyss. The air tasted of burnt ozone and ancient fear, the kind that predates empires and languages, the kind you feel not with your nerves but with whatever part of your soul still remembers what it was like to be prey. All around us drifted the wreckage of universes, broken constellations, inverted planets folding inward like dying flowers, ruined imperial fleets from timelines where the Emperor never rose, their ships drifting like coffins across a cosmic tide that carried echoes of prayers spoken by people who never lived. The Custodians stood resolute, but even they trembled as the two emperors, ours and the constellation-clad variant, moved closer, drawn not by intention but gravitational inevitability, like twin singularities spiraling toward annihilation. The clash had already begun long before they made contact. Alternate laws of physics collided, timelines screamed, realities flickered as though someone were flipping through the pages of existence too quickly. I saw 1,000 futures, some where mankind ascended to godhood, some where humanity was extinguished by shadowy beings with no names, and some in which the Imperium never existed at all. Just a vast and empty universe where humanity remained scattered and small, dreaming quietly beneath foreign stars. And then the moment came. The two emperors touched, not physically, but psychically, their wills colliding with such monumental force that even the void recoiled, distorting into spirals of molten geometry. A shockwave tore through me, hurling my consciousness into other versions of myself. Fragments of my identity scattered across realities like shards of a shattered visor. I stood on Terra as a child. I fought as a guardsman on a snowy moon. I died as an Astartes crushed beneath a tyrannid titan, and then I snapped back, gasping, my lungs filling with the cold breath of a universe that no longer recognized its own rules. The two emperors were changing, their forms unraveling into shapes beyond the limits of human theology, their halos cracking open to reveal infinite versions of their own histories. Our emperor staggered, a sight I believed impossible, and for a brief, horrifying second, I saw him bleed golden light that dripped into the void like molten truth. The multiversal emperor roared in a voice that carried the weight of every timeline where he had been triumphant, defeated, resurrected, or forgotten, and the psychic blast sent waves rippling across the void, ripping sectors of reality from their anchors. Imperial fleets thousands of kilometers away were crushed into splinters by the force of clashing divinity, and I watched in mute terror as an entire alternate Terra imploded, folding into a pinprick of white fire before vanishing forever. My faith faltered, not because the Emperor suffered, but because I realized that even gods could drown in the magnitude of infinite selves. The Custodians beside me began to fracture, their bodies splitting into overlapping afterimages, each drawn from a slightly different version of who they were meant to be, until only one version remained, trembling and uncertain. The fracture between realities widened, screaming as though the multiverse were tearing itself free from chains placed upon it by gods who had no right to bind it. The Emperor turned toward me, my Emperor, and his voice entered my mind as a whisper, fragile and exhausted. Bear witness, for the truth must remain when I do not. I felt something inside me break, a crack running through the core of my loyalty, mingling grief with awe. The other Emperor, cosmic, wrathful, impossibly vast, raised a hand that contained constellations I did not recognize, and the void around us ignited with psionic fire. Then they collided, truly collided, and the multiverse detonated into silence, a silence so absolute it felt like the first moment after creation. For a terrible instant, I saw both emperors flicker, phasing between victory and defeat, their forms dissolving into patterns of golden lightning. And then one of them, mine or the other, I could not tell, began to fall, his armor breaking apart into fragments of holy scripture, his crown shattering into stardust. I reached out in helpless instinct, my gauntlet extending across a distance that no longer had meaning. And in that moment I felt his pain, raw, ancient, immeasurable. The pain of a being who had carried all of humanity's sins across every reality and found even that burden too small compared to the weight of his own reflection. The last thing I saw before the void swallowed everything was his eyes, dim, human, frightened. And I realized the Emperor had learned something no god was ever meant to understand, that even divinity can be outnumbered. And then the universe ended, or perhaps only changed, and I was left drifting in the embryonic dark of whatever came next, clutching a single terrible truth to my chest like a dying star, that the Imperium had won, or lost, or become something beyond either concept, and that in the end, even the Emperor could bleed. When consciousness returned, it did so like a reluctant tide, pulling me upward through a darkness so heavy it felt ancient, primordial, the kind that existed long before stars learned to burn. And as the black receded, I found myself lying on a surface that wasn't solid so much as obedient, shaping itself to match the outline of my armor as though recognizing me from a place beyond memory. The void was gone, or perhaps it had simply changed into something new, and in its place stretched a dim, gray horizon that flickered with faint patterns of circuitry buried beneath translucent sand, as if the entire landscape were a single immense machine, dreaming in slow, mechanical pulses. I rose unsteadily, my limbs trembling with echoes of realities that were no longer attached to me, and for a moment my vision split into 3 separate futures. In one, I stood victorious on the golden throne. In another, I wandered through a dead Terra, and in the third, I dissolved into dust before my own eyes. Then, like a hand wiping condensation from glass, the futures snapped into one, leaving only this strange half-world humming softly beneath my boots. Far in the distance, something glowed, a golden ember rising from a crater the size of a small moon, pulsing with slow, exhausted light. I knew instantly what it was, though I wished desperately to be wrong. The Emperor, or what remained of him, lay at the center of that crater, half buried in the humming earth. His armor dimmed to a dull, wounded bronze, his halo reduced to a trembling corona of sparks that flared weakly with each labored breath. The sight crushed the air from my lungs. I had seen the Emperor depicted in 10,000 illuminated texts, always radiant, unbreakable, eternal. But here he was simply alive and barely. I moved toward him, each step pressing soft ripples through the responsive ground. And as I approached, I felt the weight of realities shifting behind me, like the slow turning of colossal gears. The multiverse had not collapsed, not completely. It had compressed, folded, rebraided itself into a single reality, built from the strongest surviving threads of countless universes. It wasn't our universe anymore. It wasn't any universe. It was something new, raw, unstable, trembling under its own newborn gravity like a child learning to breathe. The Emperor opened his eyes. They were dim, almost human, and for a heartbeat I saw confusion there, the disorientation of a being forced to remember every version of himself at once. Then he recognized me, or perhaps recognized the idea of me, and his voice entered my mind as a whisper so faint it felt like memory. "We are not where we were." I knelt beside him, my hands trembling as I brushed away fragments of metallic soil clinging to his chest plate. The carved sigils of his armor cracked like old marble. He raised a hand, and even in weakness the gesture radiated sanctity, and touched the side of my helm with fingers that felt impossibly warm, painfully mortal. "Lord, what happened?" I asked, though I already knew. His answer drifted through my mind as a soft, exhausted echo. "That which is infinite cannot survive itself." Behind us, the horizon groaned, splitting open into towering monoliths of fractured time that rose like broken pillars of an unfinished cathedral. Within their translucent surfaces flickered ghosts of universes that had not survived the collision, entire civilizations trapped in slow-motion collapse, their last moments replaying in endless silent loops. I felt tears rise behind my eyes, an emotion I had not tasted since childhood, because each of those images was a gravestone, a memorial to worlds that had never even known they were dying. The Emperor weakly turned his head, looking across this stitched-together reality with an expression that was not sorrow, not regret, but something I had never imagined he could feel: humility. "This realm," he whispered, "was shaped by witness, by the one who remained conscious when creation folded." A cold realization slid through me like a blade of ice. He meant me. I had carried memory through the collapse. I had been the anchor point. This new reality, this newborn universe, recognized me as the observer who had survived while all others fragmented. I tried to speak, but my throat burned with panic. "My lord, I did nothing worthy of such power." His reply trembled through the air, faint but resolute. "Power is irrelevant. Continuity is not." Behind him, the crater's golden light dimmed further, and I felt a jolt of primal fear. The Emperor's life force was unraveling, threads slipping through the cracks of this unstable universe. I gripped his hand tightly, refusing to let go. And in that touch, I felt everything. His victories, his failures, his infinite reflections across the multiverse, each one bearing a different expression, a different emotion, a different fate. And beneath all those layers, I sensed a truth that shook me to my core. The Emperor had not survived the collision. Only a single, fragile echo of him had. The real Emperor, the one who had guided mankind through millennia of darkness, was gone, dissolved into the collapse of infinite selves. This was an echo, a shadow, a memory given shape by a universe desperate for a god. He squeezed my hand gently, and the gesture carried the weight of 10,000 years of sacrifice. "You must become what remains," he whispered. "You must carry the throne within you." I shook my head violently, tears slipping down my faceplate and hissing against overheated ceramite. "I am no emperor." His fading light flickered, almost like a smile. Neither was I at first, and with that, the last ember of his divinity dimmed, the golden sparks around his halo flickering out one by one until only silence remained. I bowed my head, pressing my forehead to the cracked armor of a god who had died a second death. And in that quiet, trembling moment, I felt the newly formed universe shift its breath around me, waiting, listening, choosing, and I realized with a horror deeper than anything I had felt in the war itself, that the multiverse had crowned me. When consciousness returned, it did so like a reluctant tide, pulling me upward through a darkness so heavy it felt ancient, primordial, the kind that existed long before stars learned to burn. And as the black receded, I found myself lying on a surface that wasn't solid so much as obedient, shaping itself to match the outline of my armor as though recognizing me from a place beyond memory. The void was gone, or perhaps it had simply changed into something new, and in its place stretched a dim, gray horizon that flickered with faint patterns of circuitry buried beneath translucent sand, as if the entire landscape were a single immense machine dreaming in slow, mechanical pulses. I rose unsteadily, my limbs trembling with echoes of realities that were no longer attached to me, and for a moment my vision split into 3 separate futures. In one, I stood victorious on the golden throne. In another, I wandered through a dead Terra, and in the third, I dissolved into dust before my own eyes. Then, like a hand wiping condensation from glass, the futures snapped into one, leaving only this strange half-world humming softly beneath my boots. Far in the distance, something glowed, a golden ember rising from a crater the size of a small moon, pulsing with slow, exhausted light. I knew instantly what it was, though I wished desperately to be wrong. The Emperor, or what remained of him, lay at the center of that crater, half buried in the humming earth. His armor dimmed to a dull, wounded bronze, his halo reduced to a trembling corona of sparks that flared weakly with each labored breath. The sight crushed the air from my lungs. I had seen the Emperor depicted in 10,000 illuminated texts, always radiant, unbreakable, eternal. But here he was simply alive and barely. I moved toward him, each step pressing soft ripples through the responsive ground. And as I approached, I felt the weight of realities shifting behind me, like the slow turning of colossal gears. The multiverse had not collapsed, not completely. It had compressed, folded, rebraided itself into a single reality built from the strongest surviving threads of countless universes. It wasn't our universe anymore. It wasn't any universe. It was something new, raw, unstable, trembling under its own newborn gravity like a child learning to breathe. The Emperor opened his eyes. They were dim, almost human, and for a heartbeat I saw confusion there, the disorientation of a being forced to remember every version of himself at once. Then he recognized me, or perhaps recognized the idea of me, and his voice entered my mind as a whisper so faint it felt like memory. "We are not where we were." I knelt beside him, my hands trembling as I brushed away fragments of metallic soil clinging to his chest plate. The carved sigils of his armor cracked like old marble. He raised a hand, and even in weakness, the gesture radiated sanctity, and touched the side of my helm with fingers that felt impossibly warm, painfully mortal. "Lord, what happened?" I asked, though I already knew. His answer drifted through my mind as a soft, exhausted echo. "That which is infinite cannot survive itself." Behind us, the horizon groaned, splitting open into towering monoliths of fractured time that rose like broken pillars of an unfinished cathedral. Within their translucent surfaces flickered ghosts of universes that had not survived the collision. Entire civilizations trapped in slow-motion collapse, their last moments replaying in endless silent loops. I felt tears rise behind my eyes, an emotion I had not tasted since childhood, because each of those images was a gravestone, a memorial to worlds that had never even known they were dying. The Emperor weakly turned his head, looking across this stitched-together reality with an expression that was not sorrow, not regret, but something I had never imagined he could feel: humility. "This realm," he whispered, "was shaped by witness, by the one who remained conscious when creation folded." A cold realization slid through me like a blade of ice. He meant me. I had carried memory through the collapse. I had been the anchor point. This new reality, this newborn universe, recognized me as the observer who had survived while all others fragmented. I tried to speak, but my throat burned with panic. "My lord, I did nothing worthy of such power." His reply trembled through the air, faint but resolute. "Power is irrelevant. Continuity is not." Behind him, the crater's golden light dimmed further, and I felt a jolt of primal fear. The Emperor's life force was unraveling, threads slipping through the cracks of this unstable universe. I gripped his hand tightly, refusing to let go. And in that touch, I felt everything: his victories, his failures, his infinite reflections across the multiverse, each one bearing a different expression, a different emotion, a different fate. And beneath all those layers, I sensed a truth that shook me to my core. The Emperor had not survived the collision. Only a single, fragile echo of him had. The real Emperor, the one who had guided mankind through millennia of darkness, was gone, dissolved into the collapse of infinite selves. This was an echo, a shadow, a memory given shape by a universe desperate for a god. He squeezed my hand gently, and the gesture carried the weight of 10,000 years of sacrifice. "You must become what remains," he whispered. "You must carry the throne within you." I shook my head violently, tears slipping down my faceplate and hissing against overheated ceramite. "I am no emperor." His fading light flickered, almost like a smile. Neither was I at first. And with that, the last ember of his divinity dimmed, the golden sparks around his halo flickering out one by one, until only silence remained. I bowed my head, pressing my forehead to the cracked armor of a god who had died a second death. And in that quiet, trembling moment, I felt the newly formed universe shift its breath around me, waiting, listening, choosing, and I realized with a horror deeper than anything I had felt in the war itself, that the multiverse had crowned me.